Super Rugby Round 9, the power rankings, the calculations are in. If you've been with the channel for a while, you will know I did power rankings last year as well. I had to slightly adjust the formula for last year. New formula this year, kind of an adjusted one. Still areas for improvement. I am having a look at things now. It's a lot more dynamic than I intended. I like the idea that teams never tremendously jump or drop, but there are a few jumpers and a few droppers this week. But again, part of that is just the parity in the comp. A lot of teams are so close that one win or one loss, especially if you're losing at home or getting a big win away, really gives your team a big boost. So yep, there are a few teams on the move, the majority, and yeah, we will have a look. Starting at the bottom, it is the Sunwolves this week. They were on the bye, so they didn't get any worse. They get a chance to move up next week. The team above them is the Highlanders, and I will tell you, with their most recent loss, there is very little between these two. They are kind of on their own at the moment in terms of their positioning, so neither on a good run. The Highlanders had a decent half against the Crusaders, but then just kind of got put to the sword. So, yeah, it's just another loss for them. Season time is running out to really make that right. 13th down are the Waratahs. They are down one spot. Again, on the bye, so nothing much doing. How that Israel Folau saga plays out with them will be interesting, because obviously he's one of their key players. If he's not going to be playing, that hurts their chances, but I guess we'll see. There's still other players to choose from, but yeah, he is just, I guess, a large part of their strategy. So might be a help, might be a hindrance. I guess we will see. The next one, getting a win, is the Brumbies. They are up a spot. So 3 teams from the Aussie Conference in the bottom row, which is not ideal. But the Brumbies did get a win. It was a decent win. It was definitely much needed. So they got that under their belt. They really just need to build because, yeah, like I said, for the Highlanders, the season is fast going to be heading towards the latter stages. So they need to keep up with the teams who are ahead. Unfortunately for them, some other teams did lose, so there's still room for them to catch up in that conference. So that is the bottom row. 1 New Zealand team, 2 from Australia, but all 3 from the Aussie Conference, other than the Highlanders. Next, and it's a big drop. So what I was talking about, big drop, is the Lions. They're on a bit of a bad run at the moment, and they looked pretty lackluster against the Brumbies. That was the game. Brumbies team kind of out of sorts, hadn't won for a while, and then the Lions just weren't able to get it done. Too many dangerous players for the Brumbies, finding too much space. The defence for the Lions really letting them down. So if you can't beat an out of form Brumbies team, then you're going to be struggling against some of the tougher teams as well. So it is 11th for the Lions. I was talking in the comments with some of you guys as well. They have been kind of progressively been losing players season after season, and they've still been able to kind of maintain that top spot in South Africa, but it may be that that's catching up to them at last. Next, and down 3, it's the Reds. So they had a loss. It was away, so you can't count too much against them, down 3 spots, but they were never really in that game. They never looked like they were going to win it. It took them until almost an hour before they got a try. Up until that point, they were on 3 points. So, yeah, there's still signs of life in the Reds, but last week wasn't their week, was it? Next, and down 4, speaking of not their week, that was the Sharks. Just when you think the Sharks are going to come good, they go bad, and when they go bad, they really, really know how to do it in style. So it was a pretty poor week for them. I've talked about in the reviews their consistency just being atrocious, and it is that. I don't know how they fix that. I don't know how you coach consistency. I don't know how you coach players to play better at home, but they need work, because, I mean, hey, maybe if they finished 8th and then managed to go on an away games run, they could win Super Rugby. But as soon as you give them a home game, they seem to be stuffed. So, yeah, we'll see. Next, and these guys are slowly but surely making their way up the board. That's the Chiefs. After a pretty horrendous start to the season, they're on I think it's a 3-game run at the moment, so they're pulling themselves out of the doldrums and up the table. A close-fought home win over the Blues. I saw that game. It was a very good game of footy. They've lost Damien McKenzie, so he's a key player for them. How that affects their chances going forward, we will also kind of watch with interest. Them and the Waratahs for very different reasons, but without kind of their star 15. So, yeah, very disappointing for Damien. But yeah, the Chiefs overall looking to some positives for sure. Speaking of positives, the Stormers, oh my, they finally got an away win on tour, and it was a pretty comprehensive one as well against the team which was in top form. So kudos to Robbie Fleck and his boys. Without their big guns and against the toughest team in the Aussie Conference, they managed to get an unexpected win. So didn't do wonders for my Super Brew, to be fair, but yep, good for the Stormers. They got a win. Still not convinced. The Stormers are far from a convincing team, but yeah, take the win and learn to win away games when you've got all your big guns back as well. I don't know. What goes on with the Stormers behind the scenes is a wee bit of a mystery, I think, to all of us. Next, in 6th, it is the Jaguares, and they have been making remarkable moves up the board. I had them last at one point, and then they've gone and gotten 2 pretty solid-looking wins in South Africa when they hadn't won in South Africa for a long time. They hadn't beaten any of the current teams in Super Rugby in South Africa at all, but they've done that 2 weeks in a row, and the last one was a hiding. When they went into Durban, they gave the Sharks an absolute hiding, so man, big ups to what they're doing. They've kind of pulled their season out of the fire, and they're sitting in a playoff spot, so yeah, can they maintain it? That question kind of remains for virtually every team in the South African Conference at this point, so who knows? It certainly isn't me. Next, down a spot. My Blues made it as high as 4th, but it is down to 5th now. Hard-fought loss to the Chiefs. They managed to pick up a bonus point. It was a close game. A game they could have won, which is something we haven't been able to say about the Blues in trips to Hamilton for quite some time. So their 4-game winning run has come to an abrupt end, but it's not doom and gloom for the Blues yet. They didn't just melt away or lose the plot. They still looked decent at times. James Parsons getting a fair bit of stick in the comments for his contributions in that game. But yeah, a bonus point. What can I say? It was a good game to watch. They didn't give up. Next, the Rebels. Once that kind of high-flying team that, apart from games in South Africa, they looked to be pretty on form. In Australia, they looked quite the team to beat, but then they got beaten. They don't like playing South African teams, do they? A lot of you guys have mentioned just like maybe it's the size of the forwards. I don't know. I'd need to analyze what the stats are on how heavy their packs are, but yeah, the Rebels just did not have a good week against the Stormers. Kind of a bad home loss, back down to earth for them. They look more convincing than they did last year, but they still look vulnerable, and that's kind of been exposed a few times this season. So more work for Dave Wessels. He's a good coach. They still look the top team in the Australian Conference. You got to think that they're going to get it done. But yeah, they'll do. I suppose all they need to do is keep beating the Aussie teams, and they should make it through that way. But in terms of their aspirations greater in the competition, they're going to need to start beating some teams outside their conference as well. Next, and up 5 spots, which is what I mean about teams jumping around, is the Bulls. And basically regurgitate what I said for most of the South African teams. Who knows where these guys are at? They can put in a really dominant display one week and then throw a game away the next week. I don't know. The Bulls look slightly more good than they do bad. Their loss against the Jaguares at least was a close one. This game against the Reds was pretty dominant. And let's not forget, I mean, you kind of write off the Reds, but it was a Reds team on a pretty good run. So they did what they needed to do. They got a good victory. And someone pointed out in the comments as well that there's a pretty tasty fixture coming up when the Crusaders are going to visit Loftus. I think it's in May. So I guess look to that game for an indication on just how far the Bulls have come since last year. Next, the Hurricanes are doing a blues on me and benefiting from the bye. I think last week the teams around them, the Rebels were in front of them, the Blues were just behind, and the Sharks were just behind. All those teams lost, so good on the Hurricanes. They didn't lose, they had a bye, and they are up a spot. And in first, without a doubt, it is still the Crusaders, and in all that number crunching I do, they are pretty much double any team, so they're double what the Hurricanes are on my little points system here that I've been managing. So they should be up my wall because they are just absolutely dominant. They've had a blip in that game against the Waratahs, which in the circumstances I guess can kind of be understood, and they've had a couple of halves where teams have managed to kind of contain them. But over 80 minutes, yeah, man, they're just very, very tough. So number one spot for the Crusaders again. Definitely the team to beat. But as I said, they do have a bit of touring coming up, so that's going to be an interesting one to watch as well. Their depth is just phenomenal. So whatever they're doing down there, they are doing it really, really well. So, yeah, those are the rankings. As I said, there's a bit more movement than I would have liked, but I'll stick with this formula for now. It is trying to put more weight on the more recent games, which is why I guess we do see a bit more fluctuations. But yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts. As always, let me know how you would rank the teams just based on your gut instinct. And yeah, I will talk to you again soon. See you later.